Okay, just waiting for a couple of more people to roll in and then, okay, I'll start now. So I'm really excited to introduce our second workshop of the competition. It is brought to you by Interpix Design. And Interpix Design is a digital agency composed of a team of user experience and user interface design experts that have been solving usability problems and perfecting customer experiences for over 20 years. And with offices in both Toronto and Vancouver, as well as working with notable clients such as Deloitte, Microsoft, and the Royal Bank of Canada, it is no wonder that Interpix Design is one of Canada's leading digital agencies. And I'm so super excited to introduce our special guest, Carter Sanders, a UX specialist from Interpix. He'll be running through how to create a seamless experience for any product and how UX design fits into our increasingly digital world. QEC is thrilled to work with Carter and Interpix, so without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Carter. And if anyone has any questions, just feel free to put it in the Q&A and the chat will be live as well.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks, QEC. It's nice to be here. I am just going to be swapping over the screen share here, so give me a second. All right. Share. All right, so I'm going to go and put this into presenter view. Let me know if you guys can see the full thing, or if you can also, or if you can see the slides under it. Is that good for everyone?
I think we see the one with the slides underneath.
All right, let's go back and let's go play from start. Is that better?
Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, my name's Carter Sanders. I work with Interpix Design, and I want this to be a really back and forth workshop. It's obviously boring just to hear someone talk for a full 60 minutes. So this is all about answering your questions, trying to give you guys a bit of an introduction into user experience design from my perspective. And again, design is very subjective. It's very complex. So it's always nice to be able to have questions so that we can talk a little bit more in depth about the types of problems that you guys are facing as entrepreneurs. So first off, I just wanted to show this, this little bit of an evolution of design. So we've evolved quite a bit as humans, and as we come out of this industrial age, moving into the information age, it's really obvious to see the amount of digitalization that's happening in our ecosystem. Everything from our alarm clocks to our maps to how we order food is all kind of getting digitalized. And there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to grow, and there's a lot of opportunities also for consumers to be able to take advantage of using a smartphone to do tasks that they previously had never done. So I wanted to get into a little bit of an explanation of kind of the world of user experience, what user experience is, what it isn't, what user interface is, and how they can bind, because it is a little bit complex when you're looking at things. And I do like to simplify it with a great example here of the Heinz ketchup bottle. So when you think of Heinz ketchup, the user interface would be the bottle, the glass bottle that it previously was in right here. It would be the logo that they used. It would be the fact that they have different colors and a different layout here for the actual label on it. That's all symmetrical. And again, that's all the user interface. The actual product that they're selling is the ketchup that's inside of the bottle. It's completely separate from the user interface and the way the bottle is designed and appears. So when you look at the user interface of something, the user interface of something really is a collection of the hierarchy, the layout, the colors, and the overall look and feel of the product. Now, the UX side of things looks at the experience of someone who wants to use a ketchup bottle to get ketchup onto their plate, onto their, on their food. So the user experience looks at, okay, how do people do that? Where are they doing it? Are they doing it at home? Are they doing it in restaurants? And the user experience is more about the idea of how the people are using the product, not so much about how it looks, which would be the user interface. And then we can talk about the usability of the entire product, which would be the combination of both the user interface and the user experience, creating the entire usability of the product. It's illustrated a little bit better here when you look at the different ways that you can achieve user experience, the different ways that you can achieve a user interface, and then also looking at the intersection of the two. So as designers, as product designers, as sales and marketing experts that are trying to design products and services, we have to understand the difference between the tools that we have available and how those tools can come together to affect the usability of an experience. So to find more about the user experience of something, you can use user research, you can use usability testing, whether that be remotely, whether it be in person, whether it be moderated, which is when you walk through it with someone and walk through a test with someone, or it could be unmoderated, which is when you develop a test beforehand and you run someone through it with some kind of a software program. And then when you're looking at the UI side, you can look at the way that different layouts, different contrasts, different graphics can all affect the way that a product look and feels. So there's also quite a few different influences on the UX of something. So when you're looking at the user experience of a product or service, there's a lot of things that affect that. The user persona of who's actually going to be using that product or service, the company that is developing it and the company goals, the technology restraints, and then also the team restraints. So there's a couple things that would affect how the user experience can be changed, and all of these 4 different aspects would have a role in that. Now, a big term that came into effect just recently is the idea of user-centered design. So user-centered design can be thought of as placing the user or the actual end, let's say you're designing a product, the person that would actually be using that product on a daily basis, putting them in the driver's seat instead of you as the business owner always making the decisions. It's really about taking a step back as the business owner, because at the end of the day, you're probably one of the worst users of your product. You understand a lot about it. You understand a lot about the competition, but you're not using it on a daily basis to achieve what your user would be using it to achieve. So being able to realize that difference and understand the difference there, I think, is really important for a lot of companies. You have to be humble to be able to take a step back and understand that you aren't the only one that is going to know the answers. Nobody has all the answers. It's not saying that the users do, but you have to understand that it is a collection of everyone's ideas that comes together. So I think of design very similar to building a house, to designing a house. I mean, there's a lot of ways that designing a digital product can be similar to designing an actual product or asset like a house. First off, you have to start with rough sketches, and you need to know exactly just rough dimensions of how everything's going to work together, have an overall framework of what the project's going to look like. And then as you slowly work down the line and you're building your house, it then becomes a little clearer. You take these designs and you work with an architect, and they really make sure that everything's a little bit more looked at, tied down, calculated. Then once you work with the architect, you might get into going and getting permission from the city planners to really get a good understanding of, okay, now that you have these plans, how do they match up with what the city bylaws are and what the city wants you to do with the property as well? So then it gets a little bit more in depth here. Then after you get the city approval and you start building the house, that's when you get to start deciding, okay, what do I want this to look like? What is the door going to look like? What are the bricks? Are we going to use white? Are we going to use shingles? How are we going to actually put this together and make it come to life? And at the end, you've got your house and it's all being built, but it was built in a systematic process. There were people that gave their inputs along the way, and there was always a goal at the end, which was to build a house. And we systematically approached that goal. We didn't start with the shingles and then go backwards and figure out the actual layout of the house. You start with the foundation and you work towards the final layer, which is the visual layer. A cool little story here that kind of shows the importance of design. Back in the day, airplane cockpits were all originally manufactured for each airplane. There was no congruency, there was no shared understanding between all of these manufacturers on how can we make a very easy cockpit and dials and instruments. Everyone was doing it on their own. So that created a situation where pilots had to be completely retrained when you're looking at all these different aircrafts. It wouldn't be the same every time they got in there, and that obviously causes an inconvenience. There's a learning curve. It's not consistent to what they know, and they're not able to consistently get better and better at it because they're always having to, let's say they change planes, they're going to have to learn how to read all of these new dials. So these designers came together and they decided to create something called the 6-pack indicators. So they looked at all of the different indicators. They interviewed a ton of pilots. They watched how they I guess, read these indicators, what steps they read them in. They took a lot of observations. They really looked at what they were doing and how they were doing it. So what they did was they took all of those findings and they compiled them into 6 different indicators that are standard across all airplanes that any pilot could get in. They have their core 6 indicators. Although there's lots of other things they can do, they know where those core 6 indicators are. So in my opinion, what design comes down to is a process and also a focus on prioritization. So as business owners, as startup owners, we are always focused on probably 1,000 things at once. You've got hiring, you've got taxes, you've got business plans, you've got pitches, you've got marketing, sales, everything to do. You're trying to build, you're trying to fix things, you're trying to bug test. And it does create a bit of a chaotic environment where you do lose process sometimes. So the ability for a nice, clean, step-by-step process is what I think is the easiest way for someone to be able to tackle design. So that starts with discovery. So pretty much getting an understanding of, okay, what are we working with? Involving all of this project stakeholders. That would be management, that would be the people working on the project, that would be the people using the app, getting a good understanding of everything that you're working with. And then from there, within a similar step, you're then going to define, you're going to pick one of them with all of the information and data that you've collected in discovery. You're really going to zero in the definition stage and understand what kind of model you're going to be building and what kind of problem you're really going to be focusing on. From the definition stage, you can then get into design, which is getting a little bit more abstract and using brainstorming to, again, accomplish that one problem that you set out to solve, coming up with some task flows, user journeys, how people are going to navigate that problem. Then moving over into UI presentation, once you've designed a rough framework and gotten all your brainstormed ideas down, then you can start defining the key screens needed to achieve that problem. And then at the end of that, validating. You always have to be validating with users and making sure that your findings aren't just going to be coming out of the process in your head. It's going to be coming out of a defined process with the team, with management, and then also with the intended users. So I don't have access to the question and answer here. I'm just going to take a quick break, see if there's are there any questions that have come up? Let's see here. All right, no open questions so far. Does anybody have a question before I move into this next portion of it? So pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through different methods that you can achieve all of these different steps within the process. I think that a big thing within a startup community is just identifying small little projects that you can tackle. It doesn't have to be completely redesigning your entire app. It doesn't have to be testing every single little problem that you may think that you have, or any small new thing that you want to add to the app. I find that a lot of startup companies, they have almost a disease called featureization, and they like to just take any kind of feature that's out there and just throw it into the app, because they think the more the better. The more that we can give value and put all of this value into the app, maybe the more people will use it. Oh, perfect. We got a question. Okay. What are some of your favorite research techniques during the discovery phase and then iterating on the solution to a problem? Very good question. There's a lot of different research techniques. My favorite is just one-on-one interviews. So I like to do one-on-one interviews. I make them pretty quick, about 15 minutes, and I really want to understand not what they want, right? Because no one really knows what they want. I want to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I find that in a good maybe 15 or 20 minutes, you can just a one-on-one interview with someone that's using your product, understand why they're using the product, understand what it's helping them accomplish, and just get them even to show you currently how they move from step to step in your process. Which step in the step-by-step process is the most challenging in your opinion, and why? I think that the most challenging is the validation stage, because that's technically happening in every step. So the validation stage technically happens within every step. I think that a lot of people, why it's the most challenging in my opinion is a lot of people don't validate. A lot of people make decisions just based on someone telling them in their interview, hey, I think it would be really cool if I could do X. Hey, I always thought that if this was over here, it could help me do Y. You take individuals' subjective opinions and you pretty much just take that as, oh, there's the evidence. But the evidence is more with being able to take a concept and test it across multiple people, not ask them what they want. It's again, being able to see, okay, let's say you want to make something faster. You don't ask someone, how could I make this faster for you? Because they're not really going to know. If you're trying to test how to make something faster, run them through the process, run 10 people through the process, see where they're getting stuck, understand why they're getting stuck at that process, right? By having an understanding of, okay, I ran 10 people through this process. They all got stuck on this scenario, whether it be through it took them twice as long as the people who did understand the scenario, whether it's the fact that 7 people couldn't complete it. And then try maybe moving something around or taking why those people were getting stuck, changing the page, and then going and testing that with another 10 people and then going, oh, okay, only 2 people got stuck and they were able to complete the task in half the amount of time. Now you have objective data to make your decision on, instead of just asking someone subjectively what do they think, and then just using that as validation. So I think that that's the hardest one, because it happens from the start of the process all the way down to the end of the process. All right, Maria asks, where do you get your inspiration from? That's a good question. My design inspiration, I think, comes from being in sales and marketing. That's where I got, right after I graduated from Western, I went and I worked in sales and marketing at a software startup. And I think that for me, at least, I loved the selling and the business aspect of things. But as a salesperson, working really closely with a lot of these customers, I realized that there was a lot of their voices that just weren't getting heard. And the company obviously cared about making money, obviously. And they didn't care as much about listening to the customers. And I saw that actually slowly hurting month after month their revenue and slowly hurting their ability to grow. It's something that I brought up, and it's something that the company wasn't really interested in. So it actually was the big catalyst that made me go back to school, take a 12-month intensive design course out of California, which was great. It was all online, called Springboard, if you guys want to look into it. And I think that being able to see firsthand, if you don't listen to your users, and if you just think that the only most important thing is making money, and if you think that you know what's right, you're probably going to get smoked in the world of business. So you really have to be humble and listen to your users, in my opinion. And Vanessa asks, when doing user interviews, do you think that quality is greater than quantity applies? Would you recommend doing more interviews with many different users, or focusing on a few users in detail? That's a good question. And I hate to say it, but it totally depends on the project. Now I'll try to give you some, I guess, some reasons why it would vary. I think that you would want to focus on a quantity of users if it's something technical within the app that you're trying to solve, whether it be like A or B testing. So let's say you're trying to figure out, should we make this button red or blue, and see which one leads to more, I don't know, more revenue or more completions. Then you could do much more quantity. If you're looking for quality, And it's something that is really important, like a high value customer. For example, I recently worked with internet call centers, and they really wanted to know how were people calling in and why were they calling in to reset their routers. Like they were looking to pretty much reduce the amount of call support. So instead of going out and interviewing 500 people, I thought that like this is a scenario that would make much more sense to interview a little bit deeper 5 different people that have called into their internet service provider for service outages and ask them why they called in. What would have been scenarios that could have avoided them calling in, and just kind of walking through that whole, I guess, start to finish process. Where it's a little bit more personal and less objective, like should we take option A or should we take option B? If you're looking for that kind of testing, then I'd definitely go with quantity. If you're looking for specific insights on like a really small subgroup of people, or if you're looking to tackle a certain problem and you really want that in-depth journey, I would then recommend doing in-person interviews with people and trying to get that quality instead of just looking for quantity. And we got one more question here. Would you recommend using heat map / recording tools like Hotjar or others? If yes, how can we use this data to improve UX? Thanks. Good question. Hotjar and those types of apps, like the recording apps that show how people, if you don't know what it is, it shows how people navigate your website. So it kind of takes mini sessions of every user that comes onto your site. It shows where their mouse is going, and it shows how they navigate the site pretty much. I think they're great tools that you can use in your arsenal. I would recommend having them. The data that you get out of that would be probably used to then identify, like kind of in the definition stage or in the discovery and definition stage. So you'd probably want to use that data to then find a more narrowed down problem to solve. So if you're seeing on Hotjar that that people get to a certain page and then they abandon the page, or if they get to a certain step in the signup process and then they're abandoning that step, then that would give you some data to then be able to go figure out the problem that you're looking to solve, figure out why it's happening, and then being able to then implement those changes and then look at the heat map and the data later on to see what's improved. So I think it's a good tool. It can give you some pretty interesting answers. And there's a lot of different ones like Hotjar. I think there's LogRocket that also shows you code problems as well. So I know that a lot more people have been using these automated programs, which just helps give a little bit more of a bird's eye view on what's going on with your website. All right, those were great questions. Thank you everyone for asking. I'm gonna jump into, keep asking questions by the way, and I'm just gonna jump into the next part of the presentation after I answer this from Philip. At what point should a startup start focusing on UX? Should we have it in the back of our minds from the beginning, or should it be more of a focus at a key point in time? Well, you're asking a UX designer, so I'm going to say it definitely should be a focus at the start. I mean, the whole reason why someone would be using your product would be to accomplish some kind of task, and your product's design will help increase how they adopt and the speed at which they adopt to that. And you're trying to reduce any kind of barriers. So if you're looking at design, it could be the smallest thing that that makes or breaks your product. So I think that there's an importance that you should place on it, because as a startup, you should really be good at just doing one thing, maybe 2 things. But like, I think a startup needs to be really good at just doing one thing. A lot of startups have all these big ideas and they just try to go too big, and they almost use the shotgun approach. When Netflix started, they weren't looking to be what they are today. When Netflix started, they literally were sending out DVDs to people, like just like Blockbuster was, but they were doing it through the mail. And Netflix then all of a sudden realized, okay, a lot of people are asking for a catalog to order off of. So they're witnessing the fact that there's a catalog, and their first big UX thing was, let's just make a website where instead of them emailing our support team or having to download it from a PDF, we'll just make a website where it's really easy to see all of the categories that we have, and it's easy to filter through it. That's all they focused on. They didn't focus on anything else other than let's just make a catalog. So that's what I would recommend, is just focus on something that you can be really good at. That also comes from focus and prioritizing things, because I think a lot of startups don't focus on UX. They focus on pretty much everything else, but they focus on features, but they don't focus on, okay, why are we even building this in the first place? And is this truly something that customers are telling us, or is this just something that we have in our heads? All right, so let's get back into this. I'm going to go through a little bit of, I'm going to break down each step. And again, if you guys have questions, I'll break after each step, and we can kind of do like a little bit of a Q&A period after each step. So let's go into here. Oh God, I went all the way back to the start. All right. So discovery. Discovery is where you really understand and you map everything out. It's step 1 of 5 in the design process. And we can also think of this as a sprint. I don't know if you guys are all aware, but sprints are used in like Google Ventures. A lot of people in Silicon Valley use sprints. It's 5 days to accomplish each of these steps. Very quick, rapid prototyping, fail rapidly, just get everything out of the way really quickly so that you can, if needed, do another sprint next week. But it makes it so that UX doesn't have to be this massive investment. It makes it so you can get everything done in 1 week. So discovery, step 1 of 5. So first thing first, as a UX designer, as a product owner, as an entrepreneur, doesn't matter where you are, who you are, you have to understand the problem. So nobody has all of the data. It's up to your team, it's up to you to collect the data unbiasedly and look at it. So pick a small area of focus that is going to be investigated and improved over the course of your project. This includes never losing sight of your end goal, the original problem that you're kind of setting out to solve. And you need to know that you can accomplish this goal, this problem, with limited resources and a limited budget. For example, this is a SaaS media and hosting company for video and audio. These are all of their different business cases. These are all of their different possibilities on what you can use their service for. I mean, they've got this media dashboard that's pretty cool. It gives you reports and analytics of all the keywords and themes that you upload through your audio and video. They've also got a video section. They've also got an audio section. They've also got roadmaps for like what they want their product to be in the future. And they've also got customer success. So first things first is, what are we going to be able to do with our budget? How much budget do we have? How many people are involved in this project? And what can we really make a big impact on, because we don't have unlimited time, we don't have unlimited budgets, and we have to pick something that we can win at. So really good idea is to just understand what you have and what you're going to be picking to work on, because UX is best when you work in small projects. You don't want to just take on the world. Work on small chunks, if you will. Then from there, figure out what is used and what is unused. So of that small subsection that you're looking to investigate, let's say it's the customer success journey. What's used and what's unused? Most people that use an app will only use a small percentage of the features. So they kind of find their own happy path, right? They tend to suffice with just using the features that they need. Although there's lots of other features, they just need a couple of them. So they've developed their own workflow. They've developed their own way on how they use your product to accomplish the task at hand. So you can look at this by maybe breaking up all of your features or all of your services by percentage. Maybe it's steps in the journey, maybe it's features. You can look at, okay, like what are these people even using? You can use Hotjar, you could use interviewing to figure out this data. Just try to get creative on a way that you can figure out how people are actually using the different parts of your service. You can also do it by the outcome. So what are the outcomes that people would use this service? Are they using your service to upsell? Are they using it to retain customers? Are they using it for customer acquisition? What are the outcomes out of using your product or service? And similar to the outcomes, but more tactical, would be accomplishing a task. So what direct tasks are they actually accomplishing while using your product? This gives you a pretty good understanding of the areas of opportunity. It gives you a good understanding of the method at which they're using that small subject that you're going to focus on as a UX designer. So then from there, you can develop a goal or prompt. So I find it's best, almost like a scientist, when they go into a new research project, they develop a hypothesis. So as a UX designer, as an entrepreneur, you can develop your own hypothesis, which would be more like a goal or a prompt. So I came up with one. This is just completely fictitious, just for an example, but it can be just, it's very big concepts. Like imagine a mobile app that enables you to impulsively identify and purchase a garment or accessory that you see in real life. So then you're going to be designing an end-to-end flow for this example that covers the experience from the moment of awareness. So I'm assuming this person might be at the mall, they might see it on someone. It's kind of like Shazam, but for clothes. You see it and you're like, hey, that looks really cool. I want to buy that. So what's the end-to-end flow from the person being aware, the person then pulling out their phone or calling you as a service, or what is the awareness stage? And then what are all the steps in between up until completion, purchase, order fulfillment, whatever it may be. A really good tool that you can use with your team for discovery are called HMW Statements. How might we? So if we're looking for how might we statements on the original prompt, it would be how might we let users impulsively capture something that they see in real life and use point and click on their phone? How might we allow users to easily sift through the options to find the one that was originally spotted? How might we enable users to quickly purchase items they found? So you start thinking of, okay, so if we're solving this problem that we see, how might we, what are some potential solutions on how we might be able to achieve this original problem that we set out to solve? So let's take a break here, see if there's any questions that have come through. If anyone's got some more questions on the discovery portion, I know we kind of went through them, so I can move through to the define process if no one has any. Okay, cool. All right. So next up for step 2, we have the definition stage. So now that you have an understanding of kind of the bigger picture or how everything ties together, all of your how might we statements, now let's look and start to understand the evidence. So definition is now like, let's start defining all of these different things that we just came up with. So what have we found and what are the implications? Some questions that you can ask are, what are the start of the current user journey? What's the last step? And based on everything that we just put together, like what are our highest rated opportunities? What are the pressing risks associated with these opportunities? Is this going to be desirable for our clients? Should we do this as a business decision? Is this feasible for our design team? Do they have the resources? Do we have the engineering capabilities? Do we have the integrations to be able to even do this, this thing that we set out to solve? So definition is about asking yourself the hard questions, narrowing down all of the different possibilities to solve the original problem that you set out to solve. Then the next part becomes a little bit, this actually is the fun part in my opinion. This is when you really get to be able to brainstorm and start sketching and creating storyboards. So there's a lot of different exercises on how you can do this. Again, you might be doing these kinds of brainstorming sessions in step 1 or 2. You can use them throughout the whole process. Again, it's really flexible. The whole time is about ideas, designing, and iterating the whole time. So in the 3rd step, the design step, this is when you can really start to put stuff onto sticky notes and to start arranging the sticky notes. You can do something called Google's Crazy Eights. Crazy Eights is when everyone gets into a room, they get a piece of paper and they fold the paper into 8 different rectangles. So you have like the paper's folded up, you fold it twice or whatever, and you have 8 different rectangles. Then everybody gets together and they come up with screens, visual elements, possibilities, just sketching on these 8 little squares on how they can solve the how might we statements. So when looking at the how might we statements, how might we's are now transferred into screen designs with drawings, with little notes and little UI elements. Again, all rough sketches by hand. It's all about just getting everything up here onto the paper. If you're doing it virtually, there's a lot of great services out there. We use Miro internally. Miro is great. Figma is also really great for coming up with designs. You can see everyone moving their mouse in real time. And if you just go and you look at design thinking sessions, innovative design, just do a quick Google search and type in some exercises, and you will be able to find a handful of them. In this step, you're also going to want to, in one shape or form, kind of walk through a visual of a user flow. So this can be done with squares. Some people use like squares, rectangles, triangles to show decisions and to show different screens. You can keep it simple and just have different steps, kind of like I used here. Just look at what happens from the user launching your app. Then okay, they launch their app and then what happens? Okay, they can capture an image, they can track an order if they've already tracked an order, and just really like walk through the bare essentials on the key screens needed to accomplish your how might we objectives or questions that you wanted to answer. Then after this happens, then you focus on the UI presentation. So instead of getting really excited on all the different UI and tools that you can use, and should we use a drop down here? Should we use radio button? Should we use checkboxes? Instead of getting bogged down in all of that, make sure that you just use paper for like the first day or two to get all of your ideas down and prototype. A lot easier to change ideas on paper, to scribble stuff out and to try new ones than to have to design stuff and move it around on a screen. Also, when you're validating with users, very, very easy to be able to walk them through sketch prototypes. You can sketch things and then you can prototype that all together. So you could technically make an app through just paper screenshots, and you can use InVision Studio, which is an online free tool that allows you to take an image and identify hotspots on the image that would then link to another image. So you could just do it all by hand. You could create buttons and then identify on that button that when a user clicks that button, it gets them linked to the next page. So you can actually start to prototype and test things out without even having to get into any kind of design software and develop any kind of a brand style guide or to think about any of the UI stuff. You can do it all by hand. Great way to rapidly fail. Again, that is a big part of success in startups, are how well you respond to failure, how often you fail, and how that translates into success. I see another question popped up, so let's get back into here. All right, Alexia asks, what is your favorite method? Are some more effective than others depending on the problem? Yes, so definitely some are more effective than others depending on the problem. Again, depending on what you're looking to build, what you're looking to solve, there's lots of different methods out there. Geez. One of my favorite methods recently that I found is on a website we use called Optimal Sort. So just with this whole pandemic, and I'm sure that you guys are experiencing it, big transition onto online collaborative platforms using software and tools that you may have been able to get away with doing in person. Now you're doing a lot more online. It's called Optimal Workshop. I think that they do have a free plan, but there's also paid versions as well. Optimal Workshop allows you to do some pretty cool stuff with testing, card sorting, with developing different data points just based on running a test. And then they give you a lot of different memory trees and different things that you can manipulate the data with. So it's good if you want to use that as an observation tool. You can also develop as many tests as you want within it, and you could run A/B testing as well. So For example, you can see the way people think about things. So you can develop different buckets and you can develop a list and then see how people put those ideas, how they classify them into different buckets. Or you can also give no buckets, give them the option to make their own buckets and then watch how they group information. I think that nowadays is really important to understand like the mental processes behind your users and how they're grouping information, how they find information, how they think of information together. So that's been a pretty cool tool that we've been able to use in our user research. Our clients have really enjoyed it. It gives them a little bit of an understanding to our process and the reason why we're making our recommendations, because a lot of the time when we're coming in as UX consultants, I mean, we don't have the answers either. Like we're just another, opinion at the table, if you will. But what we've done is we've developed a bit more of like a scientific process to pulling out data and presenting it with our recommendations. So at the end of the day, our recommendations are just our recommendations. You can take as you will with that. But what we find is really effective is being able to show them our recommendations while showing them the rationale behind our recommendations. And when you have the fact that you can say, hey, we went and we interviewed 50 different people. This is how we tested everything. These are the results that we found. You'd be really surprised at the way that people think differently of it. It's also funny because you can then run a concurrent test and send it to your client and watch how the client, whether it be the executives, whether it be all of the designers and engineers internally that are doing stuff, it's very interesting to see what they answer. And then you can compare it to what their users actually said, because a lot of the time they think that they know what their users want best. They think that they know best. And being able to show some data and just present that is really powerful. Kate. Okay, so Kate asks, do you find that private companies versus startups have different focuses when working on various UX, UI projects? Or has your experience with large and small businesses been similar? No, very, very different. Private companies and even public companies we've worked with, they have much larger budgets and they have much larger, how can I say it, issues or projects that they want solved. So we usually would then get into like a much larger, it would take probably like a year or a year and a half if we were doing a large project with them, because a lot of the time they'll have UX processes that span across multiple applications, and we'll be doing a full facelift, which is changing the way the whole visual layout looks so that they all look the same. A lot of big private companies or corporations, what they have is they have 20 years of slowly adding to their tech stack. So they have maybe their main website is hosted here and they use this and they built it in 2008. And then they have a software product that they built in 2015 that looks like this. And they have all of these different, I guess, interfaces that do come together to a top corporation, but they're so sporadic. They've all been designed differently. So they take a lot more time. Versus a small business, a startup, which is we've started working a lot with e-commerce companies. We started working a lot more with subscription companies, doing software subscriptions, achieving monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue. And interestingly enough, they work on much shorter timeframes. They're looking for, when they come to us, they usually have very small and defined testing that they want us to run for them, because we'll also just run the testing for them. But it's interesting that when we're working with bigger corporations, they want us involved the whole time to fix all of their problems, all of their interfaces. Smaller companies typically want a small subset of skills. They want to keep it small. They have a defined budget. They have a defined time frame that they want to get it done in. So then it makes it a little bit easier, actually, because you're able to know, okay, this is what we can do for you. This is why it's going to work. And this is when we can start and this is when we'll be done, versus taking on like a much larger in-depth project with a bigger company. All right. So yeah, saving the UI for last, because a lot of people don't get this right. I mean, they get UI, they try to do UI like within the first within the discovery phase, and they already start looking at their competition and what their competition's doing. And although that's important, really start with the problem, start with the how might we statements, start with the brainstorming, because it's very easy to drift away from the problem or to try to add to the problem, which then adds to your time frame, which then adds to your budget. So the importance of zeroing in is really coming to a head in 2021, especially with everyone working from home and having to really make sure that you're planning together, because it's easy to let weeks get away from you when you're working from home and you're not going into the office and seeing each other every day. It's really easy to put stuff off, to say, we'll think about it later, to say that, we'll just keep it broad until we figure some more stuff out. I hate hearing those things. They lengthen the process. They cause so much confusion, and they get away from the task at hand that you set out to solve. So a question you can ask yourself are like, what are the key aspects in terms of developing a delightful experience that just helps them accomplish that one thing we set out to solve? What are the key screens? Like, just taking it from a very, very easy, high level perspective, what would be like necessity screens that they would need to navigate through to get what they're trying to get done. So for this example of the taking a picture of a piece of clothing, it's really important for them to like have discovery and to then purchase that. You want to quickly identify what it is, and you want to be able to add it to your cart and purchase it. So you'd want to really quickly be able to capture something that you see in real life with your camera. You definitely need to be able to sift through the options and see if that's actually the piece of clothing that you actually spotted. And then you'd also want to be able to quickly save that to a shopping cart, or save that to a wish list, and leave it there for the next time that you want to come back and maybe order it, or maybe you want inspiration or send it to someone for a Christmas list or whatever. But we're not looking into how are they going to be able to send that to someone? How are they going? Should we build an area that's a wish list? Should we we're just trying to solve that original problem that we started out with. So it's very easy, as you can see, to start adding things on when you don't need to be adding anything on. So best thing that you can do here during this stage, when you start to look at the UI and start to look at how you can actually make this sketch come to life, is don't try to reinvent the wheel. I see so many companies that are just trying to create their own custom date scrollers and trying to create all these custom. Just look at what works for other people and make it easier on yourself. Like, a lot of these companies, let's say, for example, Snapchat, Snapchat's got a great camera setup. When you open up Snapchat, Snapchat's got hundreds of developers. They've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on testing, and it works pretty well for Snapchat. So my point is that don't try to reinvent the wheel and try to make everything your own, but look at what's working for other people and look at how you can duplicate that into your own app. Leverage native iOS controls. If you're building a mobile iOS app, you can use that. There's a mobile date picker that's just intuitively native to the iOS store. Why would you need to have a custom date picker unless that's some very important aspect of your service? Leveraging existing apps is just a way that you can become more efficient as a designer. It's a way that you can start to see connections and trends. You can start seeing how different apps are displaying information. You can try it out on yours, and you can see what works with your users. Because again, it's not just about finding what works for you. It's about finding it, adapting it to your app, and then validating that with some user testing. So after you sketch out what's out there on the market, then it starts to become, how can we now take what's out there and what I like about what other companies have done, and how can I make sure that that helps me and my company accomplish what I set out to do? So this is when you can really start to create more of a prototype sketch, which would be more of what a low fidelity version of your prototype would look like. So notice how much work we've done before we got to this point. That's something that I want to point out. we didn't just start here and start sketching. I mean, you could. It's not as effective in my opinion. You could start here, and this could be your version of usability testing, and you could sit down with your users and just do this if you wanted. I mean, it would be better than not doing anything. But think about how much we've figured out before we even got to this step of being able to prototype and being able to sketch. We've figured out quite a bit. We figured out that we can have the camera pop up, that it can look very similar to what Snapchat looks like. Maybe we can have like different views, like a tab view where they can save it at the bottom. And then it starts to become, okay, like these are kind of the elements we want. Now, would it make more sense if we have the save button down here? Do people like it down there? If I run a scenario in user testing, and I ask someone, okay, open up the app and save a dress to your favorites. How are they doing that? And are they able to walk through that? Are they hitting any roadblocks? Did they look towards the top left or the top right? What were they doing that gave you an indication that they were either accomplishing that task or they were having difficulties with that task? Some cool technology that we've been able to use recently is called eye tracking software. So this is when you actually get somebody into a room in front of a computer, and the computer has eye tracking software on it that actually tracks where the eyes go in relation to the mouse in live time. So you're able to see when a page first loads, where are their eyes going? And then when you look back on the data afterwards, the circle will get bigger and kind of grow in size if they're staring at a certain area on the screen for a while. So that, it's similar to Hotjar. It gives you some good data points and that back up your design. And it also gives you a pretty cool way to see how people first interact with a product. And you can see how they literally biologically interact with that interface. I think that a lot of the time people forget that there's an actual human that's going to be going through that process. And I think that it's just a good way to remind yourself that you are developing this for a person who is using your app, not just out of the goodness of their heart, but out of a need that you are accomplishing for them, whether it's speeding up a workflow, whether it's giving them an ability to make more money, whether it's giving them an ability to find more clients. Whatever you're doing for them, they're using you for a reason. So I think that being able to really like remember the fact that you got a user on the other end is a nice thing to keep in mind as a designer. So from there, I guess kind of the amount of fidelity that you want to go into with your final tests, because again, you're iterating these tests all along with your low fidelity. You're testing these out with users as you go, so that by the time you get to this point where you're making your fidelities higher and adding more consistency, maybe adding some shading, maybe adding some icons or some more elements to make it more high fidelity, you don't have to worry about now testing things that you've already tested and confirmed. So what you can do with these prototype sketches, again, you can prototype them together in an actual app. So if you wanted to use InVision, you'd be able to prototype it, but this is also a way to be able to see the layout in more of a written format, where you're able to describe the ways that the user would be using that one page, the options that they have off of that page, where the options bring them, and then what they're able to do within that next view. So you can almost view it as like the top level view, then the detailed page views, and then even more detailed page views as they get further into your app and further along the user journey. All right. So last step in this whole process is validation. Again, it's happening all throughout your testing, but at the end, it's really, really important that you make sure that you validate all of your prototypes with evidence and findings. You share this with your stakeholders, and you decide on what's actually going to be going into production, because this, again, is all up to this point. It's all testing pretty much. Like, you haven't put anything into production. It's all just trial and error. It's all finding observations. It's all coming up with solutions. And until you really sit down as a business and you see how everyone has reacted to these tests and these developments that you've done, you really don't know which direction to go. So this is when you decide as a company what you found, all of the results of your usability tests, and what you will be doing moving forward. So it's when you reflect on your usability findings. What did you learn from the test? Maybe this is when you include, you can even put together like a little PowerPoint presentation or a video where you can clip together certain audio or video clips that emphasize your point. You can maybe clip through how everyone walked through your different scenarios. So you could have scenario 1 and explain what the scenario 1 was, why you decided to run people through scenario 1, how it attributes back to your original problem. Here are a bunch of short video clips of everybody being able to achieve it, not achieve it. Based on that, here's what we changed, here's what we retested with these people, and here's why it now works. Make a list and discuss it with the team, and that list is going to be what you guys will then be handing off to the development team. That will be the list that goes into maybe goes to a project manager who's then going to plan out the design and the actual implementation of your design findings. So see how we haven't even involved the engineers, because the engineers want to start building. Like engineers they're incredible people and they want to start building right away. So this is where you can just say, okay, we've done all of this testing. This is what we want. Here's a nice package. Now we can really hand it off to the engineers. They should be involved with brainstorming, but they shouldn't be involved with the actual building of it per se. And this is when you hand it off and then they go and they make it. So what would be some usability findings that may have like come out of this whole dress and instant picture example that I gave? So all the participants use the categorization to find the dress match. So being able to have a way to categorize and being able to have that as maybe the second step would be really important, because all of the participants use that to find the match. Participants were adding multiple items of the same search result to their cart, so they didn't lose the items they liked while scrolling through. So that's more of a one-off finding from this. Maybe you start seeing like a weird habit that starts developing with the users, and it's something that you may have not even thought about, but it's something that comes into effect based on all of your research and testing. Just looking at things like taking note of things that are interesting but not pressing. So you can make a list of also potential design changes for the future, smaller things that don't quite attribute to the how might we's or to the as your user I want to type problems that we set out to solve. And those can be earmarked for whether it be another round of usability testing or a future design consideration later on. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff now. So that is the end of my presentation. I really enjoyed the questions that you guys were sending through. So if anybody has, I think we have a couple more minutes, maybe another minute or two. If anyone has any more questions, please send them over. If I don't get to your questions or if we've run out of time, please add me on LinkedIn, Carter Sanders. I'd be happy to connect with you guys on LinkedIn and answer any of your questions. Maybe even jump on a quick 15-minute Zoom call if you guys want to meet with me. And if you guys have maybe a list of a couple questions that you wanted me to run through with your companies, I would love to do that. I'm all about helping out, and I really enjoy this. Thank you for the opportunity to let me present, Margaret and Nicholas and everyone else who's involved in the conference. It's been really interesting to be able to read through all the business plans, and you guys are very successful. It's impressive.
Thank you so much, Carter. I'd just like to say a big thank you again for joining us today and running such a thorough and enlightening workshop on the importance of user experience and user interface design. But in the interest of time, I don't think we're going to be able to take any more questions, but we did have a lot, and I'm sure everyone had and gained some valuable takeaways. And as Carter said, if you do have any more questions, feel free to connect with him through LinkedIn and check out his website as well. He'd be happy to answer any more that you have. And yeah, thank you so much again. And that'll be the end of the workshop. And I think we have a dinner break right now. So get pumped for that.